I'm Jess. This is Stephanie. We're here to introduce you to some incredible invertebrates. Thank you guys so much for coming out to your classroom and virtually coming out to the zoo with us today. The first thing that I want to say is that invertebrates include 95% of the entire animal kingdom. So 95% of all animals are actually invertebrates. And what that means is that they do not have a backbone. They don't have vertebra in vertebrate. So since we can't show you every single invertebrate in the world because that would take too long, I do have some pictures here to give you some examples of some invertebrates that you might not even think about. Our first one are things like jellyfish and corals and sea anemones. We've also got mollusks like an octopus, a snail, or a bivalve. Sponges are invertebrates. They're also animals. Starfish are invertebrates. They're in the echinoderm family. Earthworms, which you probably see after it rains, and then even the teeniest, tiniest little things in the world can be animals, and invertebrates also include plankton. And you might recognize this guy. He's a copepod, and he's a star on the show SpongeBob. So even though there are lots and lots of invertebrates in the world, 84% of all of those invertebrates are in the group arthropods. And arthropods are what we call our crunchy invertebrates. They have hard outer shells called an exoskeleton. They have jointed legs, and they also have segmented bodies. And some very famous arthropods that you might know of are things like spiders, crabs, horseshoe crabs, scorpions, and we're going to meet a few of them today. We're going to focus on arthropods just because they cover such a wide group inside invertebrates, and they're a really, really cool and diverse group. So we're going to start with our insects, which are our bugs, and Stephanie is going to introduce you to our insect.
All right, so we're actually going to tilt the camera down so you guys can see what we're holding in our hands. So I have a Madagascar hissing cockroach. So these guys are obviously found on the island of Madagascar. They are flightless, so they do not actually fly, but they are one of the larger species of cockroach. They do have, as an insect, 3 body segments. So you are going to have your head, you're going to have your thorax, and then you're going to have your abdomen, which you can see on them here. Now, these guys also have 1 pair of legs per segment. So you can kind of maybe see his legs on the side. So he has 1 up on the front segment, 1 in the middle, and then he has this back one down by his abdomen. Now, with these guys, they do what's called molting. So they don't shed their skin like a snake would or like a lizard would. But what they're going to do is they're going to grow their new underneath. They're going to grow their new exoskeleton underneath, and then they're going to actually just kind of burst out of that. And the outside is just going to look more like a shell. So they're going to be kind of soft when that first happens. So that's going to be when they're most vulnerable to predators. But within a short period of time, it's actually going to start to harden. Now, with these guys, there are over 1 million species of insects. So Jess said they are a very diverse group. These Madagascar hissing cockroaches are named so because they do produce a hissing behavior. They actually just exclude air from their spiracles, which are little holes kind of on the side of their exoskeleton. And that air makes a hissing noise, and that's one way they communicate to each other. So they can kind of hiss at each other. They have different varieties that the cockroach is going to tell what maybe the mood of another cockroach is by their hissing that they have. And another thing they do is live in very, very large groups. So this is a male hissing cockroach. So you can tell by these little humps that he has on the top of his exoskeleton. His head is actually tucked down underneath these antennae that he's moving around. But what they'll do with that in their big, large groups is they're actually going to fight with those humps. So they're going to fight with different territories. They're going to fight over females, and they're just going to kind of push each other around with that. So they're going to use those. They do use these antennae. You can see them kind of moving them around. That's how they feel their environment. So he's going to feel around and kind of tell what's going on, kind of touch to see if there's a place for him to walk. And then that way it helps him to find his food as well. They are kind of nature's garbage men. So they are detritivores. So they are going to clean up that forest floor. They are mostly a rainforest species. So they're going to eat all of those dead and decaying things on the ground. And then they're the garbage men. So they're going to pick all that up. They're going to kind of eat that. And then, of course, their poop is kind of going to be making no soil. So they are one of our helpful rainforest cleanup crew. So we do have another animal from Africa that's going to come out as well. So this is our hissing cockroach. And then our next animal is going to look a lot different.
All right, you guys. So our next friend is not an insect. This is a millipede, and millipedes are not actually part of the insect family. They are what we call myriapods. Myriapods are unique because they only have 2 body regions. So you can see, I'm going to get him as close as I can. You can see his head there at the very top with his antenna. And then the rest of his body is called his trunk. And those are his 2 body regions. He is still segmented like other arthropods. He's got all of these segments that go down that trunk part of his body. And millipedes have 2 pairs of legs, so 4 legs total, per segment. And that's actually one thing that makes them different from centipedes, which you might have also heard of. Centipedes are also myriapods, but they only have 1 pair of legs per segment, so only 2 legs per segment. Millipedes include things like roly-polies. This is an African giant millipede, so obviously from Africa. These guys can actually get to be up to 12 inches long, so a foot long. He's probably 5.5 to 6 inches long right now, so he could potentially get a lot bigger. These guys have up to 40 segments in their trunk, so that's quite a lot of legs, but it's not quite a million like we think of when we hear the word millipede. Their legs, usually they can get up to maybe 120, all the way up to 160 if they try really, really hard, but your average is about 100 legs per animal. So he is still an arthropod, so that means that he does still molt the same way that other arthropods do. So he's got this hard exoskeleton on the outside, and those exoskeletons are usually made out of a material called chitin, which we're going to talk about a little bit more when we see another one of our animals later on, and I think you guys are going to be really excited about it. These guys are also detritivores, and you might remember that Stephanie said detritivores eat leaf litter and dead things off of the forest floor. So he is also a garbage man. He's got a very, very important job in his ecosystem. And that is true for all of the invertebrates, all of the arthropods that we are going to see today. So some people see them and they think that they're creepy and crawly, and maybe they are, but they all have a very important role to play and a very important job in their ecosystem. And hopefully you guys will learn a little bit more about that when we talk about some of our other animals. Last but not least, arthropods are kind of diverse, so they all have very, very different ways that they defend themselves. So this guy, that you know, the hissing cockroach makes a hissing sound, obviously. This guy cannot hiss. He is not a hissing millipede. What he can do is actually ooze out a really, really gross, smelly liquid that would probably not taste very good, and that tends to deter things from trying to eat him. It's definitely not something that you want to put in your mouth. It probably tastes terrible. So his main defense is just to taste really, really bad. That doesn't stop some animals. He is still a very important prey item for a lot of things, and that puts him at a very important part of the food web. If we didn't have millipedes anymore or cockroaches, our food webs would sort of build up with trash all the way at the bottom, and a lot of animals would lose their main food source. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more with our next few animals. I'm going to go ahead and put our millipede away, and Stephanie's got another animal ambassador for you to meet.
All right, so we're going to switch our drawers here, and our next guy is already down here, so I'm going to pick him up. And he is part of the arachnid family. So this guy here is an arachnid. So they have 2 body segments versus the 3 segments that the insects did. So they have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. So the cephalothorax is where their head and their thorax are fused together. And then they have that big abdomen there. So now the arachnids don't technically have antennae, and do have several well-developed eyes, but it doesn't mean that they have really, really good vision. So there's actually the jumping spider that has incredible eyesight, but most of these guys can't see very well, including the Vinegaroon that I have here in my hands. He's kind of turning himself around. So this Vinegaroon is also called a whip scorpion, but they are more closely related to spiders than they are to scorpions. Now, he is called a Vinegaroon because you can kind of see that little thing on the end. It's called a whip telson, and that is where he can spray a vinegar-like substance from. So that is his defense. He's going to spray out like vinegar. Now, he does have, it looks like he only has 6 legs, but he actually has 8 legs because he has 8 that are legs and 2 that have been modified to kind of be like feelers. So he does use those front as sensory organs because he doesn't have the best vision. So you can see that he's kind of feeling his way around and checking out where he can walk by putting his antenna out. Now, with these guys, they do have pedipalps. So they have that kind of claw-like front that you can see. And with that is what he's going to use for his food. So he's going to grab in some crickets or other smaller insects, and those he's going to pinch those, and then he's going to open those up, and that's where he's going to eat his food from. So you can kind of see he's moving his front around right now. You can see him kind of opening and closing those. Now, with these guys, they're kind of in the middle as a food chain animal. So they are going to help control insect populations, but they are also going to be a prey animal for a lot of things. Now, they are found right here in the United States. So they are a southern United States animal, more like the deserts are where they kind of find them. They like that drier areas. And they can get larger than this. So this is about medium size. So they're going to get a little bit bigger. So now we have 3 different arachnids that we're going to show you. So we have different types of arachnids. So this is just one of them. But like I said, he is called a whip scorpion. So we have an actual scorpion that we're going to introduce you to as well.
All right, you guys. So this is our actual scorpion. Let's see. Here we go. I'm going to pick him up really quickly so you guys can get a better look at him. Come here. This is Horus, right?
Yes.
So this is Horus. Horus is an emperor scorpion. They can be found in Egypt, which is why we named him Horus. So these guys are true scorpions. They also have 8 legs, just like other arachnids. And then those claws at the very end are his pedipalps, which all arachnid species have. So scorpion pedipalps are converted into those very nice claws that he can use to defend himself. He's also got that really crazy stinger on his abdomen. Remember, we said that all arthropods have body segments. He's got his cephalothorax, which is the head region. And that is, I don't want to point because he might decide he wants to go backwards. That's where his head is. And then he's also got his abdomen, which is what his tail is attached to. Where are you going? So scorpions are kind of cool. We see them a lot in movies like The Mummy, or if you've ever been out west, you might hear that you need to shake out your boots. This guy, emperor scorpions, are actually known for being relatively timid. They tend to not like to be out during the daytime. They're going to be awake at night. And they also live in groups. So they have family groups that they live in of about 15 or so individuals. So they tend to sort of cluster together. Scorpions also have pretty poor eyesight. So even though they've got several eyes like other arachnid species, and even though those eyes are very complex, they are pretty, they've got pretty poor vision. And unfortunately, they don't make tiny little scorpion glasses. So they've got to figure out other ways to figure their way around their environment. And scorpions have 2 little sensory structures on the bottom of their tummy called pectines. Where I know we're throwing out a lot of words right now. Pectines are basically like little feathers that they have on their belly that they use to feel the ground. And those pectines can actually feel chemical cues as well as mechanical cues. So they can tell if there is a rock underneath them, and then they can also tell if that rock has got any kind of chemical or scent from another animal. And the reason that that's important is that these guys are carnivores. So they eat things like crickets and other small invertebrates. other bugs and arachnids even. And they are incredibly important because they help keep that bug population down. So insects are pretty prevalent. They're everywhere. There are over 1 million species of insect, and I want to say maybe 60,000 or so species of arachnids. So arachnids have to work very, very hard to make sure that those insects don't get too crazy and take over the world. So these guys do a really, really good job of helping us figure that out. Do we want to? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let Horace climb off of me really quick. I am. I'm going to move this.
Oh, I was just going to have you leave the drawer and just move your
Oh.
But
Okay, well, let's just do this. Let's swap. There we go. We got one more.
All right, guys. So this is our tarantula, because I know everybody's all excited about those. Her name is Elvira, and she's what's called a Chilean rose-hair tarantula. So they are found exclusively in Chile. Now I am holding her right in my hands here, so you can tell that she is a calmer type of spider. There's actually a lot of people that have these guys as pets. They do use those pedipalps as sensory organs, so they have those 8 legs, and then they do have those pedipalps that they can kind of feel around. She was just climbing a little bit on my hand, so she also uses her tips of her feet as well as all the hair that she has on her to feel her environment. She can actually feel little slight vibrations and can feel all the different vibrations of where things might be. So what she's going to do is she's going to feel the vibrations of her food, and then she is going to ambush it. So she's mostly going to eat other types of insects. Here at the zoo, she mostly eats crickets. And what these guys do when they eat is that they actually kind of inject a venom into their food, and it liquefies the insides, kind of makes it like a smoothie, and then they suck that out. So that's how they're going to be eating. Now, she has those urticating hairs that she has all over her body. She also has those on her abdomen. With those hairs, she can actually take her back legs and rub them up against herself, and then she can throw those hairs. So that's a defense that they have, because those hairs kind of feel like fiberglass into whatever they stick in. So she's going to kind of shoot those at things, and then they're going to want to kind of figure out how to get them out of their face instead of worry about eating the spider. Now, they do have poor eyesight, so they do use all of that vibrations that they feel with their hairs. So that's how they're going to find things. And they also molt like our cockroaches do. So it's going to almost look like a new spider when they molt. And we'll be showing you a spider molt when Jess comes back in here in just a moment. And so that you can kind of see it looks like a whole nother spider. Now, tarantulas are found kind of in a lot of different places around the world. They are also found in the pet trade. So their main importance is that they are going to be food, as well as they're going to help keep our insect populations down. So they have a very important role in our ecosystem. So I'm going to take her back, and Jess is going to come back in here and remind you of who you all saw today.
All right, so really quickly, before we pull the camera back up, here is a molt. All arthropods molt just like this, but this is an example of one from a Chilean rose-hair tarantula. You can see it pretty much looks exactly like the outside of the body. So thank you guys so much for letting us bring out some really cool arthropods to meet today. I hope that you learned something. I think we're going to take questions here in just a minute. We saw 5 different arthropods. We saw an insect, a myriapod, and 3 arachnids, but that is just a really small percentage of the 84% of invertebrates that arthropod makes up. So I think that we're going to throw it back to our host, and I think we're going to answer some questions.